Over these next two videos, I want to take a look at the sampling tools that we have in Studio One as they compare to Logic. But before we get started on that, let's take a moment to talk about sampling and what it means. Well, I've been involved in sampling since somewhere around 2010, 2011, where I developed a company, and the entire philosophy was to create deeply sounding, incredibly realistic virtual instruments that could be used by composers for either television or film, also for music industry, whatever. But the whole entire goal was to record something in the best possible way, get incredibly large amounts of information in terms of different variations, round robins, as many velocity layers as possible, and then to basically edit this down, break it into small, tiny pieces, make the tweaks and adjustments that were needed within the sampler, and then rebuild this or put this back together so that anybody who knew how to play or how to sequence could get an incredibly realistic sound. So that was my definition for a long time. And I think at the end of the day, it still will always be my core definition, but my views on sampling have also changed a huge amount in the last decade. Now, what about the up-and-coming music producer? So this could be anybody from 8 to 16 or 17 years old, something like that. And maybe for them, sampling has nothing to do with wanting to record an instrument and build a playable instrument that's custom and unique in their own. But maybe they're looking for samples, or maybe they're recording nature, or they're pulling a sample from a record. And they want to chop that and flip it. They want to change the speed. They want to change the pitch. They're going to reverse things, add effects, make it literally unrecognizable, and then build a track or use that as a bed around a track and then build a composition out of that. So for those reasons, it's literally impossible for me to cover every aspect of sampling because I don't think you could do that in even 100 hours. It's quite simply the tools you could give different artists the same tools and everybody could come up with something different if they started from a blank canvas. But that being said, I think the tools are very, very similar, and I want to give a really good comparison about the tools in Logic versus Studio One. This has changed a little bit since I use Logic. The last time that I was really actively using Logic, like I said, was quite some time ago, but we had EXS24. In a recent update to Logic, we have two kind of variations of the sampler where we have, let me just go over here, software instrument. We have sampler multi-sample over here. And then we have, I think it's called the quick sampler. Yeah, quick sampler. So what are the differences between the two of these? Well, the quick sampler is just a simple tool. So if you wanted to pull in an individual sample and you wanted to be able to adjust, make some settings, LFO, LFO2, modulation matrix, pitch, filter cutoff, amp settings, anything like that, I could just load an individual sample here. Maybe let's go with this one over here, MBT-C4. Okay, this is just a sample from one of the instruments that I did that was a music box. So you load the sample in, then you have the ability to make some adjustments in terms of the lengths. You can adjust the ADSR. Like I said, if you're using this on a regular basis, you understand what this does. So this is for if you just need something simple. So what is the Studio One equivalent for this? Okay, well, let's hop over to Studio One. And notice over here, I have an instance of Sample One XT. Very, very easy. Go to your Instruments tab, Sample One. You can see over here, just drag and drop this right in. Now we have Sample One XT. We'll close the effects in the keyboard section for now. Now at its heart, it is very simple. Like I said, a lot of samplers are very, very similar. And if you understand the concept of sampling, you could probably move into any DAW and get going instantly with their sampler. We have a filter cutoff section. We have the cutoff frequency. We have the resonance. We have the ADSR that's assigned to this. We have an amp setting. We have the ability to go monophonic. I can adjust my glide, LFO. We have pitch. Now, let's load a sample in here. A couple different ways that we can do this. You could either, if you had something like a beat or a percussive loop or something, you could just drag and drop that right in here. And also, if you were loading from the actual browser in Studio One, you could, for example, send to new sample one. And now you have a sample one instance where this sample has automatically been loaded. If we go to the WAV file, you can see this over here. You have your in points and out points. These all snap to zero crossings. We can zoom in and out either by using our scroll wheel or adjusting like this. And we can also adjust the audio zoom in terms of the vertical zoom resolution. So all these tools are pretty useful. Let's hop over to the other instance though for now. And I'm going to go back. Whoops, not that one. It's going to be this one over here. And let's just use this add sample option directly from over here. And let's add that same sample that we were using. This is set to something else at the moment. So let's go to our documents and third-party libraries. And I went to the music box. And we'll go to the music box samples. And we used C4. Okay, we will open the same sample. So now, like I said, a lot of these are similar. I can adjust the low to high range directly over here, or I can adjust things like the root. So for example, if you see the information that's available in the actual name of the sample, I could change this to C4, and I've just changed the root note and then my low and high playable ranges. Now, one instant difference between the two of these is that I can add multiple samples if I wanted to. So for example, I could add all of these, and notice now that they're just kind of like auto mapping and they're splitting up between themselves. I could take all of these and I could drag them out to move them or adjust them. I could pull all the ranges out together and they're moving relative to each other. In this case though, let's remove these. So we're just sticking with our original sample. We have an area over here where we can see the waveform. We can adjust the in point and the out point just by doing this. Another thing important to mention is this is very useful, especially when you're working with lower level samples that have been recorded. I can use my mouse scroll wheel to zoom in or out. I can also just click across here, and I can use this slider over here if I want to. One other thing though that's very, very useful is we have the ability to adjust this in point, and as we're adjusting this in point, it's automatically going to cycle through the zero crossing points. So for example, over here, notice as I adjust this, it's going to the next positive wave cycle. So this makes it really easy to kind of avoid clicks and pops and things like that. Now we also have the ability to use either enter something directly by typing it in, or just click, holding, and dragging to adjust. And if for any reason you wanted something that was in between the wave cycle, you could adjust the start point and the end point in that way as well. But like I say, for the most part, having this snap to zero crossing points is a really, really good thing. I'm just going to pull this over here for a moment. We have different loop options. So we have off, we have sustain, we have release, and then we have ping pong. So it's kind of going back and forth. In terms of the playable ranges, the trigger modes, we have normal, which would be kind of like a normal direct from disk sampling behavior. We have one shot, and then we have toggle. We can reverse the sample, so it's going to play in reverse. If I held down C4, let me open up my keyboard. Okay, versus how it was performed. Another thing we have is we have the ability to normalize a sample. I would never have a sample triggering at full scale, but what I would do sometimes, especially if I was wanting to make a starting point of a preset, is I might click the normalize option and then actually adjust my amp volume and pull my amp volume back to something like -12. Then you kind of know that all of your samples will be peaking at somewhere around that level. Well, let's just readjust that for now. Okay, things like filter envelope, for example. If I put my filter on, I can adjust. Okay, we have a resonance. We have drive, we have punch. We have the ability to choose different filters. I don't really want to go over everything here because the video would be too long, but this is, like I say, just a really, really basic way to be able to work with individual samples. And as we know, it's not just limited to one sample. If you wanted to build a simple 1-octave instrument, you could chop up 12 different samples, drag them in, assign them to different ranges, or if you drag them in together, they will auto map, and then you could literally just lasso select them and drag them until the root node of one of them lines up, and then relative to each other, they should be good. Okay, so we've got our wave, we've got our mapping over here. We also have this envelopes section, which allows us to adjust the actual curves with the mouse click behavior. And notice that as I adjust this, notice that it's also adjusting in this section over here. It's kind of updating. So I can adjust some very, very basic elements over here. And you'll see that it's updating in this section right over there. Okay. Now, in addition to that, we also have a record mode. This is kind of similar to what we had in Logic, where basically we set an input. We have a monitor output if we do want to monitor this. And then I can just record. Check, check, check 1, 1, 2, 2. We can click the stop button now. And now automatically see this sample over here. It just says R sample. If I wanted to give this a name, that's something I could have done ahead of time, and then it would have named it whatever I named it accordingly. Now if we go back into the mapping section over here, and I go to C1, let's just go back to the wave section for a second, or rather mapping, and let's adjust the range over here. So now, check. I can go into the wave section of this sample, and I can adjust this, and this is going to snap to those 0 crossing points. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. And then I'll set my L point somewhere around here. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. And then, of course, all the things that you would expect, you know, being able to adjust the pitch or move it up.
1, 1, 1, 1.
If I want to change the pitch, but I want to have it stay the exact same speed, if I enable follow song tempo,
1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1.
Or move down.
1, 1, 1, 1, 1.
Okay, and then our filters, everything just kind of as we're used to. So we have our mapping, we have our envelope, we have our ability to record. Now the other really cool thing about this is we have built-in effects. So we have effects A, we have effects B. So you have everything from modulation, chorus, flanger, phaser. We have a delay, we have a reverb. So if I... another cool thing here is within the delay, we also have the ability to send the delay to the reverb. Then in effects B, we have a gator. There's a bunch of different presets that we can toggle through. Make this stereo. Let's go to the hops. Let me go back to this main sample over here, which was... It's a little bit easier to hear things. And then we have a distortion section. This is really awesome, especially when you're dealing with things like, for example, if you bring in individual 808 samples and you want to add some distortion. The cool thing about this is you can do it all from the sampler. You don't even have to load external plugins, third-party plugins or stock plugins, because there's a lot of tools that are available just from within Effects A and Effects B. Now, and the last one here, which is also another really, really useful one, is a panning. Just the depth. Maybe we'll go back to Effects A. We'll kill our delay, our modulation, and our reverb. We'll just go to Effects B. Adjust. Okay. Also, we have our gator still on. So, like I said, just a really, really great tool, whether you need to do vocal chops or you need to do, basic instruments. You want to program something quickly. You capture an octave of something and you want to build an instrument that's instantly playable that can exist within your song. This is a great tool. Now, if we hop back over to Logic and we take a look at the sampler, in my mind, I still see this as being EXS24 because for so many years that was exactly what I used when I worked in Logic, and also when we developed our sample libraries. For the first 2 or 3 libraries that we released, we actually included EXS24 patches as well, in addition to Contact, and then it's something that we kind of dropped off later as our instruments got more advanced. And if we couldn't do it in EXS24 to match or sound as good as Contact, then basically we didn't do a patch. But in here, it's the same thing. Just a really, really great sounding set of sample instruments. There's this one Liverpool here. I don't know how many demos that I've used this one on, but this is just a great sampler. You can set your looping points and everything, just the individual zones. You can set groups, so if you have round robins where you're cycling through them. It's an incredibly, simple to use but complex sampling tool that just works out really, really great. Now in Studio One, we have Presence XT. Now what is Presence XT? it is very similar to EXS24 or the multi-sampler in that we have an editor over here where you can have multiple different zones, multiple different groups. You can create any of your own custom presets that you want. The other cool thing is that I'll give you an example of something that I created. I ported over a couple of my instruments to Presence XT patches and actually put them in a sound set because they are instruments that I tend to use a lot. But if we listen to these, okay, that's playing at quite a loud velocity. This one, I'm going to record enable. And let's see, let me move my octave up on my Atom SQ. So this is pretty deeply sampled. I think we did 7 different layers and then like at least 6 variations in each of those different layers. So a little bit harder when you're playing something like pads, but if you're playing a keyboard that has really good sensitivity, you can go whisper quiet on this or super loud, and it's really dynamic across the whole spectrum. And on this, I'm just using right out of the gate. I'm just using the reverb, the stock reverb that's built in. And it looks like also a little bit of EQ, just dipping out a couple of these different sections, 400 and 800, just dipping out a little bit of this. But this is an incredibly useful instrument, usable right out of the bat, or right out of the gate rather. Now another thing that's cool, if we go to back to our Instruments tab, and let's make sure I give myself a little bit of space. I'm going to drag a new instance of Presence over. And notice that we have the ability to load a preset file. Now we can either navigate to our Finder window and we can just drag and drop an EXS24 preset directly onto Presence XT, or we can click the option to load a preset file. Now from here, I would have to navigate to whatever it is that I want to load. So for example, let's see, I think we did an actual, I think for this one, I think we did an EXS24 version. So if I go to the music box, EXS24, the music box, let's go to the music box clean. Let me click open. Now I'm loading an EXS24 instrument. I've just loaded it in Presence XT. So this is the sound effects over here. And then it's just a matter of adjusting our attack and our release. Underneath the hood, very, very similar to EXS24 or the multi-sampler. We click the editor. Let me first adjust this. And then these are all the different zones. So in this case, I have just one group of files, and then the root notes, the tuning, the low range, the high range, the different velocities that every one of these samples are playing at. Depending on what you have selected over here, you could work either by the groups, or you could work by the individual zones. If I wanted to select like this individual zone, this is a zone. In Presence XT or Studio One, they call it layers. The layers are the groups, zones. Or you could work at the instrument level, and then we can adjust everything. So I'm just adjusting the release on these samples, and I could adjust the curve just to make sure it plays right. And I will record enable this. Okay, now I'm going to go back to the player and let's adjust our reverb. Okay, maybe I want a little bit of modulation or chorus. So any EXS24 preset that you have, and I know a lot of people who are Logic users, they've actually accumulated their own custom samples where maybe they were working on a project and they built a custom instrument just for one song that's incredibly usable. These are the types of things that can be loaded directly within Studio One, simply dragging, dropping from a Finder window right onto the GUI itself, or navigating in the Files section, finding the actual EXS24 presets and just dragging these across. And then once you have this loaded once, for example, once I'm happy with everything, I could go to File and I could store a preset. So maybe you want to go with a very, very specific folder where you want to store this in, or you want to give it a new folder, but you can basically just store a preset so that you would have access to be able to use this anytime. And this doesn't just work for custom libraries that you've created yourself. If you have certain libraries that you really, really like, for example, I know there's one that I think it's from GarageBand or something like that. But that Liverpool, anytime that I did any type of demo where I just needed a really quick bass. Nowadays, I'm using something by E Instruments. It is the E-Bass for Presence XT. But before that, it was always using Liverpool as kind of a starting point. And sometimes it even ended up making its way into the final production. But in that case, it would be like Macintosh Library. It would be application support. And then I guess GarageBand and Instrument Library, Sampler. So we have sampler files and sampler instruments. I guess it's called Liverpool. Here it is. So right here, I could load this EXS24 instrument, and then I could be playing some of my EXS24 instruments from Logic. I could be playing those in Studio One. So if you still have the built-in Apple included content, if you still have that, it's very easy to be able to use that. Okay. Now, last but not least, I want to focus on one more thing, and that is working with external instruments. If I go over to my browser tab, notice at the very top, I have this organized by vendor over here, but notice at the very, very top that we have some different subfolders. We have a multi-instrument subfolder, external instruments, and note effects. Now, I've already created an external instrument preset, and let me just drag that over. This is called the Alesis QSR. It's the only instrument module that I have, but I could just drag and drop this. Oops. And let me move this down. This is using actually a similar pair, or let me just set this to none. And this is basically just allows me to load my different external virtual instruments and drag and drop them as if though they were a plugin. Now I'm going to remove this for a quick moment. Let me remove this track. And let me also remove the aux track because I want to show you how to do this from scratch. Okay, so first things first, let's open up our preferences. We're going to head to external devices. Notice here that I have my Alesis QSR. I'm going to click edit for now. And for now, I'm just going to set this to none. So we'll click OK over here. Now, if I click add, we have the option to add a new keyboard or a new instrument. It's not a keyboard that I'm triggering, it's an actual sound module. So I'm going to go new instrument. For the device model and the device name, I'm just going to leave this as new instrument. I'm going to make all the MIDI channels active, and let's just send MIDI clock, use MIDI clock start, and send MIDI timecode. I'm going to choose the actual MIDI port that is connected to the external instrument, which in this case is coming from my 26C. And then I'm going to click OK, and now we have a new instrument. So let's click Apply and OK. So now in our external instruments folder over here, and to be honest with you, this is the easiest way to drag and drop this. It's just creating it from the browser and dragging it over. So I'm going to drag and drop this new instrument over. Now notice when I drag and drop the new instrument, we have an instrument track, but in terms of the routing, we need a way to Studio One's going to see the output. So the way that we do this is we just click this little icon. And now in this case, I can add an aux channel. Now what an aux channel means is that you're sequencing on a track, but you're returning it on an aux channel in the Studio One console. So I'm going to add an aux channel. So now we can see aux1. And now I'm going to set the inputs that I have assigned to this. Now in this case, I'm going to be using inputs line in 1 and 2 on my 4848. And then as soon as I'm done that, I'm going to click this one more time, and I'm going to save default. So once I do this once, it says default aux channel assignment for new instrument saved. aux1 4848 input 1 and 2. So what this means now is that from now on, any time that I want to create or use that virtual instrument, I can quite simply just drag and drop it from my browser. New instrument, I'll just drag and drop this right in here, and now it automatically creates a track. It has the proper routing in terms of the inputs and outputs, that it's seeing all of my different MIDI controllers, and it's seeing the actual inputs from the audio interface on the aux input side of things. So now, if I record enable this, let me go a little bit higher. Okay, we can play something over here. Okay, I'm going to push stop. Notice I had this record and monitor enabled, and if I now click my retrospective recording recall, this will now be recalled because I have my retro recording activated. And then from here, I could now adjust or edit any of this MIDI if I wanted to. I think I probably would prefer this to be an octave higher, so that's something we can do. Take this out of record mode and we can have a listen. So in terms of working with virtual instruments, external instruments, it's very easy. And if you want to basically adjust things where you need to recall your bank and your program, this is something that can be adjusted here within the track inspector. And then the minute you open up your song, it's automatically going to load that preset in the bank. Now, one other really cool thing that I don't know if any other DAW does this, but regardless of that, I still think it's awesome, is that we can right click and now we can actually transform this to an audio track. We have the option to render the inserts, preserve real-time instrument state, remove the instrument. I don't need to render the inserts. I don't have any inserts. I can preserve the instrument track state. This is important. And I'm going to deselect the option to remove the instrument. And then I can set like a fixed tail of something like maybe we'll set 7 seconds. And now watch this. This is now going to do a real-time render of this actual external instrument that we're working with. It's going to print it to audio, but it's going to archive it so we still have the MIDI active as well. We'll let this finish up. So now this has actually been rendered into audio. The track and channel, they're still linked with each other. You can see that this is called aux1. If I would have renamed this something, it would have been called something different. And the event name is based on the instrument name. But you know, in this case, I don't need this active anymore. I could quite simply just hide this, no longer need it. And then the really awesome thing is that if at any given point in time, I wanted to recall this actual instrument track, and I wanted to re-trigger the external MIDI from the sound module, then that's something that I could do at any given point in time. And I can also edit this, and it's going to follow just as needed. And the other cool thing is, let's say that I did want to borrow this MIDI and I wanted to trigger it with another instrument. I could just drag and drop this up here, and here we have all the actual MIDI information. So super cool way to work. So that's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to take a look at the Drum Machine Designer versus Impact XT in Studio One. So we'll catch you for more in the next video.